They built 69 houses on my land and called me the trespasser. They built an entire town on my land and called me the trespasser. I didn't shout. I didn't fight. I just opened my grandfather's old cedar chest and pulled out the 1974 deed, the one paper strong enough to sink their proud little HOA empire. And when they laughed, I said, "Keep laughing."
I told you what happened.
Until
he
I
was
bring
on
this
my
to
land.
court.
Why are you writing this down like I
The
did
first thing I
something wrong?
noticed wasn't the houses. It was the way the wind sounded wrong, like it had nowhere to go. The valley below my ridge used to answer with a soft rush through pine. Today, it bounced off stucco and glass and died in cul-de-sacs with cute names that didn't belong here. I eased the old Silverado down the last rutted stretch of my road, tires crunching pale dust I could taste. 3 years is a long time to be gone, long enough for wire to sag and a lock to stiffen, but not long enough for a forest to vanish and sprout mailboxes in neat rows. I rolled to a stop where my grandfather's cattle gate used to hang and stared at a stone monument. Ridgeline Springs, a Whitfield community. The smell had changed. Not sap and soil, but hot tar, wet concrete, a hint of chlorine. A moving van idled, diesel rumbling like distant thunder. A boy scootered past, a dog trotting behind, HOA flags fluttering from the lampposts. The sight punched the breath out of me. This land carries our name. Morrison. I said it out loud, without meaning to. A guard kiosk squatted where the fence line once ran. The kid inside lifted his sunglasses and gave me that smile people save for those who don't belong. "Residents only," he called. "I am," I said. "Past the ridge, down to the creek, up through the north stand of pine. All of it." He tilted his head toward the new streets. "You got an address, sir?" 47 acres don't need an address. I raised my phone. A photo of the deed glowed small against a world that had been rearranged. He started to reply and stopped when a white SUV slid beside my bumper like the pavement itself had called for backup. A woman stepped out with the practiced grace of someone who never trips. Linen. Pearls at noon. Sunglasses that reflected a stranger instead of my face. "Problem, Reese?" she asked the guard without looking at me. "This gentleman says he owns the development, Ms. Whitfield." Her gaze clicked onto me like a turned key. "How remarkable." She took me in quickly. Dust gray boots, a shirt that remembered a better summer, hands nicked and calloused. "Sir, this is a private community. If you're looking for subcontractor work, procurement closed last month." "I'm not a subcontractor," I said. "I'm Jake Morrison. My grandfather ran cattle here. He built a small earth dam on the South Draw in '74 with federal help. We've paid the county every April since before I could hold a pen." She smiled politely. "Mr. Morrison, the parcel you're referring to was deemed abandoned. There's a process. Our title company performed extraordinary due diligence." She gestured at the quiet street curving around new homes. "As you can see, families have invested here. It's best for everyone if you don't confuse them." "Abandoned," I repeated, my jaw setting. "Did the taxes abandon themselves?" She slid a card from a leather case and held it like it might stain. "Bethany Whitfield, HOA President. Our council can walk you through the statute. I suggest you avoid trespassing while you get your bearings." A 1-degree warmer smile. "Change is hard." The boy's laughter trailed behind him as he skimmed past the place where our north trees used to throw afternoon shade. No water there now, just a retention pond dyed blue, a floating sign that said, "No lifeguard on duty." "I'll be in touch," I said. "Through your lawyer, please," Bethany answered, already turning. "Residents expect calm." Calm. The word scraped. I put the truck in park and stepped out. Close up, the new curbing still wore a white powder haze. A nail gun popped deeper in the maze, counting time. The monument's edge was sharp under my palm. Too new for lichen. Too new for stories. I took a picture. Then another of the lot markers and orange flagging that stabbed at my grandfather's field like toothpicks. A Range Rover rounded the corner, slow and deliberate. A man in a navy polo leaned out, phone already up. The flash went off, though daylight didn't need it. Bethany's voice drifted. Documentation is a wonderful habit. She wasn't wrong. The cedar chest at my place smells like pipe smoke and rain, and inside it lives the paper spine of our life here. Deeds, surveys, a photo of my grandfather on the spillway with his hat tipped back. He didn't keep much, but he kept every receipt. A rancher's best fence is built of wire and paper both. "Mr. Morrison," the guard said, softer now, "we're going to have to ask you to leave." "Your gate sits where our salt lick used to be," I told him. "You'll see me again." At the county road, I set the brake and let the engine tick quiet. This land is never a thing you own so much as a thing that allows you to stay. My grandfather said that, or lived it so loud we all heard. I took the long loop home, past the feed store and the church whose bell still forgets daylight savings. Every mile peeled shock off, leaving something harder underneath. At the barn, the hinge complained. Inside, the cedar chest waited against the west wall. The key was where my father left it, on a nail under an old horseshoe. When I lifted the lid, cool air rose like rain smell. I spread the documents on the kitchen table, yellowed pages that kept the oil of my grandfather's hands, tax receipts in a tired rubber loop, a black and white photo with the Army Corps stamp crooked in the corner, the deed folded to the legal description that runs like a fence line drawn in sentences. I breathed and felt the tremor leave. Rage is a bad carpenter. It builds crooked. Paper and patience stand plumb. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. "Mr. Morrison, this is Daniel Kemp with Whitfield Development. We're prepared to offer a good faith settlement to avoid confusion. Call by Friday." The figure he named might fix a transmission, not a legacy. I looked at the deed until the letters steadied. Then I wrote a name at the top in small square letters. Sarah Coleman, water rights. The pen scratched. The barn cooled and creaked. Somewhere out there, fresh paint dried on houses that didn't know where they stood. When the sun went, it went clean. Wyoming dusk dropping like a curtain. The kitchen light hummed. The papers made a neat, stubborn stack beneath my palm. On the fridge, my grandfather's note had browned, but still rang clear. "Don't let them take what's ours." I turned off the light. Wind found a seam and sang through it, and for a moment I heard the old sound again, the valley answering in pine. It would again. But first, we were going to court. What would you do if strangers built 69 houses on your land? By the time the sun cleared the ridge the next morning, the frost on the fence posts had already started to bleed away. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, packed the deed, tax receipts, and a camera into my glove box, and headed back toward the new community. The truck's engine coughed in the cold, a sound I trusted more than any lawyer's promise. The road that used to rattle with cattle trucks now smelled of asphalt and new paint. I slowed near the gate, rolled down my window, and took a picture of the sign again. Ridgeline Springs, gleaming like a brand burned into hide. The same guard as yesterday looked up, startled. Before he could wave me off, a familiar white SUV slid in behind him. Bethany Whitfield stepped out, heels clicking against concrete like punctuation marks. She wore a navy blazer today, crisp and smug. "Mr. Morrison," she said, smiling with the precision of someone who'd practiced in mirrors. "I was hoping you'd come by. I'd rather clear up this misunderstanding before it gets messy." "Misunderstanding," I repeated. "That's one word for stealing." Her eyes stayed polite. "Words like that are unhelpful. I understand this is difficult, but according to county records, This parcel was unclaimed for over 3 years. My legal team. Did your legal team check the tax office? I interrupted. Because I did. And those bills were paid every April, like clockwork. The smile faltered just long enough for me to see the steel beneath. Mr. Morrison, we rely on professionals. If you think an error was made, I'm sure our attorneys can clarify, perhaps even compensate you for your inconvenience. Compensate? I leaned on the truck door. You sold homes on land that wasn't yours to sell. She drew a slow breath. You're welcome to pursue any claim you wish, but I assure you, our title is clean. You'll find that adverse possession is quite clear under state law. Adverse possession fails when taxes are paid, I said quietly. For a second, just a second, her expression hardened, eyes sharp, jaw tight. Then the mask slid back into place. I see you've done your reading. That can be dangerous without context. Context doesn't change ownership, I said. She stepped closer. I could smell her perfume, something expensive that didn't belong anywhere near sagebrush and wind. Listen, Mr. Morrison, I'm trying to help you. These families have children, mortgages. They don't need your confusion upsetting them. If you persist, you'll face legal action, and I doubt you can afford the fight. She turned to leave, but I stopped her. You already made a mistake, I said. You think this is about money. Bethany turned her head slightly, that same half-smile bending her mouth. Then what is it about? Legacy, I said. And law. The air went still. Behind her, a man in a polo shirt, tall, silver hair slicked back, walked out, from between the houses, watching us. She waved him off without breaking eye contact. Mr. Hale, she called over her shoulder. Our friend here seems confused about ownership boundaries. Could you please make sure our attorney follows up? Preston Hale. I knew the name. Developer. The kind who'd carve up mountain valleys like steak and leave the bones to the banks. He gave me a polite nod, the kind people give to a problem they think they've already solved. I raised my phone, took a picture of both of them standing by the sign. Bethany frowned. What are you doing? She asked. Documenting, I said. Like you suggested. She laughed then, soft and dangerous. Oh, Mr. Morrison, this isn't going to end the way you think. Maybe not, I said, but it will end. When I drove away, her SUV's reflection followed me in the rearview mirror like a ghost. Half a mile down the road, the ridge opened up to where the dam used to feed into the creek. The water shimmered under the weak morning sun. I pulled over, got out, and stood where my grandfather had once stood. Same wind, same dirt, different century. The air smelled of thawing earth and diesel from the new houses below. I thought about her words, about the certainty in her voice when she said the law was on her side. She believed that. People like her always do until the paper says otherwise. At home, I dug deeper through the cedar chest, unrolling maps, tracing boundaries with my thumb. Then I opened my laptop. County assessor's website. Land parcels, taxes, records. My name was right there, still listed as owner. Paid, current, valid. They hadn't even bothered to check. I printed every page one by one until the stack was thick as a fence post. I labeled the top, evidence. That night I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked too loud, and the wind clawed at the eaves like it was trying to tell me something. I made a pot of coffee and spread the papers across the table. My grandfather's handwriting stared up at me, scrawled across a yellowed corner of the deed. Don't let them take what's ours. The words were older than Bethany, older than Ridgeline Springs, older than every mortgage they'd signed. I whispered, I won't. The moonlight spilled across the pages, pale and cold, turning every line of ink into a promise. Tomorrow, I'd need help. Someone who understood land law, someone who knew water and boundaries better than developers and their pearl-draped presidents. I found her name before dawn. Sarah Coleman, attorney at law, Cheyenne, Wyoming, specialist in property and water rights. As the first light broke across the hills, I felt something shift. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. Bethany Whitfield might run her HOA like a kingdom, but she just declared war on the wrong rancher. The morning after our talk, the valley was shrouded in a pale mist, the kind that softens everything, except what's been taken. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, surrounded by papers that smelled of cedar and old smoke. Every folded corner, every ink smudge carried my grandfather's steadiness. He didn't trust banks, politicians, or lawyers, but he trusted documentation. Paper doesn't lie, he'd say. People do. The world outside hummed with early spring, crickets, a crow somewhere over the ridge, the faint thud of construction miles off. Each sound reminded me that time was moving forward without asking permission. I couldn't let it run me over. I grabbed my jacket, the one that still carried the scent of linseed oil and pine dust, and drove into town. Cheyenne was 2 hours east, but the road felt shorter with purpose in the passenger seat. The highway rolled out beneath the sky, wide and merciless. Wind turbines turned slow in the distance, their rhythm steady as my heartbeat. Sarah Coleman's office sat in a 2-story brick building above a diner that hadn't changed since 1955. Her sign was small, black letters on a brass plate, Coleman and Associates, Water and Land Law. Inside, the smell of lemon polish met the faint musk of paper and ink. She looked up as I stepped in. Silver gray hair, glasses on a chain, the quiet composure of someone who's heard every story twice. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked, voice smooth as dry creek stone. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for seeing me. Let's start with the short version." She gestured to the chair. "Who took what? And how bad is it?" I laid the deed on her desk. The paper yellowed at the folds, stamped and signed in ink that had bled a little with time. They built an entire subdivision, 69 homes, on my land, claimed adverse possession, said it was abandoned. "Was it?" she asked, lifting an eyebrow. "I paid every tax bill every year. My grandfather left this place to me. He died 4 years ago." "Receipts?" I slid a manila envelope across the desk. She opened it, flipping through the papers one by one. The sound was crisp, deliberate. "County records, water rights, the dam permit from 1974, I said. "It's all there." Sarah nodded slowly, eyes scanning lines I already knew by heart. "Adverse possession doesn't apply if taxes are current. That's Statute 41-101. She looked up. "You've been paying, they've been building. That's fraud, not confusion." "I figured as much," I said. "But they've got lawyers, money, politicians, I've got paper." Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Paper wins more than guns do, Mr. Morrison, but only if you let it." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" She took off her glasses, resting them on the desk. "If you stop construction now, the developer files bankruptcy. You'll get tied up in litigation for years. Families will sue, banks will intervene, and you'll drown in paperwork before justice arrives. So what do I do?" "Let them finish." I frowned. "Finish?" "Every nail, every foundation, every closing document becomes evidence. Once they've sold property they don't legally own, it's open and shut fraud. You'll own not just your land, but every house standing on it. Then you decide who stays." I sat back, the logic sinking in like water through gravel. It was ruthless and brilliant. "That'll take months," I said. "Then we wait," she replied. "You gather proof, photos, dates, witnesses. Don't post a word online, don't confront anyone. You're invisible until I tell you otherwise." Her confidence steadied me more than the coffee had all week. I signed her retainer agreement, felt the weight of it settle between us. When I walked out, the wind caught the edge of the door and slammed it behind me. It felt like punctuation. The diner downstairs smelled of bacon and burnt toast. I ordered a plate I barely touched, watching trucks pass by the window. Plumbers, framers, painters, all headed toward what used to be my forest. The thought curdled the coffee in my stomach. By the time I got home, afternoon light had turned copper over the fields. The barn door creaked as I pulled it open, dust motes swirling like ghosts in a beam of sun. I climbed the old ladder to the loft and found my grandfather's ledgers stacked where he'd left them, leather spines cracked, pages filled with neat numbers and careful notes. Every lumber sale, every fence post repaired, every tax paid was recorded here. I set the ledgers on the workbench beside a new spiral notebook labeled Case Log. Each page I filled would be one more fence between truth and their lies. Outside, a pickup rumbled by on the county road. Someone slowed near my gate. I stepped into the doorway and watched as a black SUV idled at the curve, tinted windows reflecting the dying sun. It lingered too long before pulling away. I stayed there until dark, the sky bleeding into indigo. Coyotes called somewhere beyond the ridge, and a chill rode the wind down from the mountains. I locked the barn and carried the ledger inside. On the table, next to my coffee mug, lay the deed, its edges worn smooth by generations of hands. I rested my palm on it, feeling the faint texture of embossed paper. "They think I'm just one man," I said into the quiet. "They're right, but they forgot who taught me to fight." The night settled around the ranch, calm and heavy. In the distance, the glow of Ridgeline Springs shimmered like a mirage, bright, temporary, and built on someone else's ground. I stood on the porch until the stars took over the sky, listening to the hum of generators far below. The new neighborhood was still half-built, but its noise had already replaced the sound of crickets and creek water. Each hammer strike echoed like a reminder of what they'd taken, but also of what they were building for me. Sarah's words circled in my head. Let them finish. Morning broke cold and sharp. I spent it marking boundaries, walking the fence line where old survey stakes still leaned in the dirt like tired sentries. Each step kicked up dust that clung to my boots and memories. The pine stumps were gray now, bark gone, roots curling toward the creek bed. That creek still ran clear, though thinner than I remembered. Downstream, the new houses sipped from it like parasites. By noon, clouds gathered over the mountains. The wind shifted, dragging the smell of wet concrete and paint all the way to my porch. I knew I should be angry, but what I felt instead was something quieter. Focus. Every sound, every truck, every nail gun was one more piece of evidence sealing their own fate. Sarah called that afternoon. "You've been busy," she said when I picked up. "Documenting. Photos, coordinates, dates, the whole mess." "Good. Keep a log. Names of contractors, license plates, everything. You're building a timeline, not just a case." "How long do we wait?" "Until they believe they've won," she said. "Then we take it from them all at once." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "And the families buying those houses?" "They're victims too," she said softly. "But we'll worry about that later. For now, we build the wall of proof." That night, I printed everything. Pages spilled out of the old laser printer like snow, each one a brick in the invisible fence I was putting up around them. A week passed, then two. Ridgeline Springs bloomed like a weed after rain. The road was paved, streetlights flickered on, and children's bikes began to line up in driveways. From my ridge, I could see them, small figures moving through a world built on lies. Then came the first letter. It arrived in a crisp white envelope bearing the HOA logo, slipped through my mailbox like a taunt. cease and desist from trespassing, photography, and harassment of residents, signed by their attorney, Brian Keir. I set it on the table beside my coffee and smiled. Every threat they sent was proof they knew I existed, and proof they knew they were wrong. I called Sarah. They're getting nervous. Good. Don't respond. Keep everything. We'll file for discovery when the time comes. A storm rolled in that evening. I stood in the barn doorway as thunder cracked across the valley. Sheets of rain hit the new roofs down below, washing mud down their perfect cul-de-sacs. For a moment, lightning flashed off the lake behind the dam, silver, alive, unbroken. 2 days later, Sheriff McKay showed up in his cruiser. He'd known me since high school, a decent man caught between politics and principle. "Jake," he said, taking off his hat, "got a complaint from the HOA. They say you're harassing residents, taking photos." "On my land," I said. He sighed. "Yeah. Look, I know how this sounds, but you need to keep your distance for now. Let the lawyers sort it out." "That's exactly what I'm doing." He nodded. "Good. Just don't give them anything they can twist." "Appreciate the visit," I said. Before he left, he paused at the edge of the porch. "You know," he said, "your granddad built half the irrigation ditches in this county. Folks forget that when they pour new driveways." "Not for long," I said. When he drove off, his taillights disappeared into the storm haze, leaving the air thick and electric. By the end of April, every house had a lawn sign. Sold. Trucks came and went, moving families into homes that didn't belong to them. I kept filming. I filmed the movers unloading couches. I filmed the landscapers digging holes in soil my grandfather had plowed. I filmed the security cameras they installed to keep people like me out. Each clip went into a folder labeled Exhibit A. On the first day of May, I stood by the old dam at sunrise. The air was cool, the water glassy. The reflection of the houses shimmered on the surface, perfect and upside down. I dropped a small stone in and watched the ripples bend them all out of shape. Sarah called again. "It's time," she said. "We file next week. Fraud, trespass, unjust enrichment, and injunction. But I want one more thing first." "What's that?" "A paper trail tying their knowledge to intent. I want proof they knew they were stealing." "I'll find it," I said. "You won't have to," she replied. "I have a contact in the county records office. Ray Delgado, old clerk. He remembers your family. I'll meet him tomorrow." I leaned against the truck and looked toward the rows of new roofs catching the sun. They gleamed like coins scattered over sacred ground. "They think they built their dream," I said. "But they just built evidence." Sarah laughed quietly. "That's exactly the attitude that wins cases." When we hung up, the wind shifted again. The air smelled of dust and pine pitch, like it used to before the first bulldozer came. Somewhere below, Bethany Whitfield was probably hosting another HOA meeting, sipping wine while warning her residents about that rancher up the hill. Let her. Every brick they laid, every lawn they watered, every threat they mailed, it all belonged to me. They just didn't know it yet. But Bethany Whitfield must have sensed that something was shifting. Because the next week, the air in town changed. People stopped waving first. Conversations at the feed store got shorter. By Thursday, my name was on everyone's lips, and not in the way a man likes to hear it. It started online, as poison usually does. Someone posted in the county Facebook group, "Beware the man claiming to own Ridgeline Springs. He's been seen taking photos of children. Residents fear he's unstable." The post had Bethany's careful fingerprints all over it, sanitized language, a tone of concern, and a closing line that read, "Law enforcement has been notified." Within hours, it had 50 comments. By sundown, 100. Folks I'd known my whole life were tagging neighbors, repeating half-truths until they sounded whole. I scrolled through them in the dim glow of my kitchen, each word landing like grit under the skin. The next morning, 2 deputies parked across from my gate. They didn't get out, just sat there watching. The cruiser's lights blinked in idle rhythm. I waved once. They didn't wave back. By noon, I got the call from Sheriff McKay himself. "Jake," he said, his voice slow, tired. "We're getting complaints. People say you've been driving past the subdivision too often, taking pictures." "I'm documenting evidence," I said. "For court." "I know," he said, "but it's getting loud. HOA's stirring folks up. Just keep your distance for a while. Let it cool." "Cool?" I asked. "They built a town on my land." Silence, and then, "I know, son. I really do. But they've got money, lawyers, PR, you've got paper. Be patient." I hung up without another word. The receiver clicked too loud in the quiet house. 2 days later, I walked into the hardware store for wire and a new padlock. The clerk, old Danny Lee, wouldn't meet my eyes. He rang me up fast, muttered, "You should stay off social media, Jake." "What's that supposed to mean?" He slid the receipt across the counter. "They're saying you scared a kid, taking pictures outside the new school bus stop." "That's public road," I said. He shrugged. "Doesn't matter what's true, only what people share." Outside, the sky had turned pewter. Wind drove dust down Main Street, catching in the flags that lined the lampposts. Across the way, the diner window flickered with faces watching me leave. That night, I opened my inbox to a new message. No sender name, just the subject line. "Stop before you lose more than land." The body of the email was a single sentence. "You can't fight progress." I read it twice, then printed it. 3 copies. 1 for me, 2 for Sarah. When I called her, she was calm as ever. "Classic intimidation," she said. "We'll add it to the file." "It's not just me anymore," I said. "They're turning the whole county." "That's what fear does," she replied. "You hold steady, I'll handle the law." But fear's a tricky thing. You can't see it in the daylight. It waits until you're alone. That night, I heard tires crunching gravel at the gate. Headlights swept across the porch, then vanished. I stepped outside with a flashlight, heart thudding. Nothing but dust and the faint smell of exhaust. The next morning, I found a flyer pinned to my fence post with a roofing nail. HOA letterhead again. "Cease and desist or criminal charges will follow." It was signed by Preston Hale himself. I laughed out loud, the sound bitter and dry. Each threat was better than proof. They were documenting their own fraud. I called Sarah and told her about the flyer. She chuckled low. "Let them keep writing. Paper trails win trials. Don't rise to it. We're almost there." Still, the noise grew. Someone left a 1-star review for my engineering firm online, claiming I'd been fired for misconduct. Then a parent from the subdivision called my office, warning my employer that I was a risk to public safety. By week's end, I was called in by my boss, Martin, a good man forced to play politics. He looked pained when he said it. "Jake, I have to put you on leave until this clears up. It's not right, but the board's nervous." "I haven't done a damn thing," I said. "I know," he said softly. "But perception's poison. Get this sorted out, and your job's waiting." I nodded, too tired to argue. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee gone cold, watching the storm clouds roll off the ridge. Lightning flashed over Ridgeline Springs, turning the rows of houses white and ghostly for an instant. I thought about the families inside. Good people, probably. Sleeping under roofs built on someone else's rights. They didn't know. They weren't the enemy. Bethany was. The phone buzzed again. A new text. No name. Give it up, Morrison. You're done. I stared at it until the letters blurred, then deleted it and powered the phone off. Enough noise, enough lies. At dawn, I drove into town and stopped at the post office. The clerk, Martha, smiled nervously as she handed over a certified envelope. Whitfield Development, LLC. Inside, another threat dressed as professionalism. This time, I didn't get angry. I smiled. Each envelope, each flyer, each rumor was another nail in their coffin. They thought they were burying me under shame. They didn't see that I was letting them build the evidence higher. That afternoon, the rain came back, soft and steady. The smell of wet sage drifted through the valley. I stood by the window, watching droplets slide down the glass. The storm muted the world. No hammers, no engines, no voices. Just the steady rhythm of water on tin. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Because storms don't last. They clean. They reveal. And when this one passed, I'd still be standing, holding every receipt, every record, every truth they'd tried to drown. The next morning smelled of wet earth and sage. Sunlight broke through the clouds in long, slanted beams that caught on puddles along the gravel road. I'd been awake since dawn, sitting at the kitchen table, going through every piece of paper I owned. The folder had grown thick, full of proof and patience. At 9:15, Sarah called. "Jake," she said, "I talked to Ray Delgado, the retired county clerk. He remembers your grandfather. Said something about an old water rights file stored in the annex basement. Wants to meet you himself." "Where and when?" "Courthouse, back archives, after lunch. He'll open it for us." I glanced toward the ridge where sunlight flashed off new rooftops. "If that man's file says what I think it does, we're halfway home." "Maybe more," she said. "Bring your calm face, not your angry one." The courthouse sat on Main Street like an aging sentinel, cracked marble steps, bronze plaques dulled by time. Inside, the air smelled of paper and lemon wax. Ray Delgado was waiting by the security door, a thin man in his 70s with eyes sharp as roofing nails. He shook my hand with a dry grip. "Your granddad was William Morrison, right? Built the North Dam in '74. "That's him." Ray nodded, motioning us into the back hallway. "Come on, then. Let's see if the past still remembers him." We followed him down a corridor lined with file cabinets the color of old pennies. He stopped at one marked Water Adjudication, Archive, and slid open the drawer. The smell of dust and history poured out. He thumbed through folders until one label caught my eye. Morrison Reservoir Permit, USACE, County Water Board, 1974. He handed it to me. Inside were crisp copies of old typewritten letters, stamped with seals, federal, state, county. At the back, a signed map showed the exact boundaries of the dam and watershed. I ran my thumb over the blue lines. They traced the same shape I'd walked 100 times. "See here?" Ray said, pointing. "That's a recorded federal easement. Means the Morrison property includes not just the dam, but the watershed feeding it. Every drop of runoff flows through your rights. Nobody can build over that without permission from the Corps." Sarah's eyes glinted. "Federal trumps local. HOAs built half their homes inside that basin." "Exactly," Ray said. "You've got them pinned." I looked at the papers again, heart hammering. My grandfather had written his initials beside the survey marks, neat and stubborn. WM, he'd never have imagined it would matter half a century later. Ray leaned against the cabinet. "Your granddad was a tough old man, always paid early. I remember he'd drive in every April, check the ledger himself. Said he didn't trust envelopes." "That sounds like him." He sighed. "Folks forget history's not that old around here. These HOA people think the world started when they paved it." I nodded. "They'll remember soon enough. We made copies of everything, certified, time-stamped, notarized. Sarah organized them into a new binder labeled Federal Water Rights. The weight of it felt different, solid in my hands, like iron disguised as paper. As we walked back to the street, wind carried the smell of rain-soaked concrete from the new development down the valley. The sound of hammering still echoed, distant but relentless. Sarah stopped beside my truck. "We're nearly there. But I need one more thing, a smoking gun. Proof they knew all this and built anyway. Check your mail, emails, any contact from them. A mistake always slips through when arrogance is involved." I nodded. "I'll find it." That evening, as the sun dropped behind the mountains, I drove home past Ridgeline Springs. Families were moving in now, children riding bikes, porch lights glowing warm. I slowed near the gatehouse, snapping a few discreet photos. A new sign had gone up. "Welcome home, residents." The irony bit deep. The guard glanced at my truck, but didn't bother waving. Maybe he'd read the rumors too. I kept driving until the houses vanished in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the twilight. At home, I spread Ray's documents across the table. The ink stamps shone faintly under the lamp. United States Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Water Permit 7-3. There it was, clear as the moon above my roofline. Proof this land wasn't just mine. It was protected by federal jurisdiction. I poured a cup of coffee, sat down, and opened my laptop. My inbox blinked with a new message, from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Ridgeline Heights Inquiry." Inside was a short note. "Mr. Morrison, I worked under Preston Hale on the Ridgeline project. What they're doing isn't legal. Call me before this gets buried. N.W." I stared at the initials. The pulse in my neck picked up. It was the first crack in their armor. The first sign someone on the inside wanted out. I printed the message and slipped it into the folder. Then I stepped onto the porch. The air was cold, clean, and smelled of wet pine. Down in the valley, Ridgeline's lights glittered like embers scattered across dark earth. The storm had passed, but another was building, the kind that doesn't come from clouds. For a few days, the valley went quiet. The kind of quiet that feels staged, like the world's holding its breath before something breaks. I kept busy cataloging everything Ray and I had found. Dates, stamps, permits, photos, each one a stone in the wall we were building. But the email from that unknown sender wouldn't leave my mind. N.W. Whoever he was, he had the courage, or guilt, to reach out. I waited a full day before replying. My message was simple. I'll listen. No judgment. Call any time. The phone rang the next evening. "Mr. Morrison?" The voice was low, strained, a man caught between fear and regret. "Name's Nathan Wells. I was a project manager for Whitfield Development. You probably shouldn't know that. But here we are." "I appreciate the call," I said. "What do you know?" "Enough to keep me up nights," he said. "Bethany and her husband Preston, yeah, he's the real developer, knew the parcel wasn't theirs. The title company raised a red flag early on, said taxes were still being paid. Preston told them to file the adverse possession claim anyway, said it would sort itself out. He paid the clerk under the table to rush permits. Got proof of that? Emails, wire records, maybe more if they haven't wiped the servers. I kept copies in case things went sideways. Didn't think they'd go this far." I felt my pulse rise. "Nathan, you just became the most important man in Wyoming." He gave a bitter laugh. "Not sure that's something to be proud of. I'll send what I've got. But I'm leaving the state. You didn't hear that from me." The line clicked dead. I called Sarah immediately, told her everything. She didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, "Send me the files the minute they come in. If this checks out, we'll file an injunction by Monday." The email arrived an hour later. Zipped folder, password protected. Inside, 6 PDFs. One was a chain of emails between Preston Hale and Bethany Whitfield, dated months before the first bulldozer arrived. Preston. Flint parcel shows active tax record. Whitfield title says risk level high. Bethany. Then we move fast. File the AP claim, get the lots listed before he notices. Preston. What if he does? Bethany. He can't afford the fight. People like him never can. I sat there staring at the screen until the words blurred. Then I printed every page and called Sarah again. She met me at my ranch the next morning, binder in hand, eyes bright with the kind of focus that can cut glass. We went through the documents line by line at the kitchen table. The lamp hummed above us, flies ticking against the glass. This is it, she said finally. Intent, knowledge, fraud. They knew the truth and buried it. With this, we don't just file civil, we open the door to criminal. She closed the binder gently. Jake, you ready for what comes next? I nodded. Always have been. Good, she said, standing. Because when we file, it's war. Media, politics, lawyers. They'll come for you harder than before. They'll dig through your life, try to make you the villain. You keep calm. You don't give them anything but facts. I've been collecting those my whole life, I said. The next week was a blur of paperwork, signatures, and waiting. Sarah filed the injunction in federal court. Fraud, trespass, unjust enrichment, and violation of federal water rights. We attached Ray's permits, the Army Corps stamp, and Nathan Wells's emails. It was a bomb wrapped in legal formatting. When the case hit the docket, Ridgeline Springs erupted. The HOA Facebook group went wild. Accusations, conspiracy theories, pleas for calm that did anything but calm people down. News trucks started showing up on the county road. A Denver paper ran a headline, HOA faces fraud allegations over land rights dispute. I stayed quiet. Sarah's orders. One evening, Sheriff McKay stopped by again. He took off his hat, leaned against the porch post. You've stirred a hornet's nest, Jake. Not me, I said. I just lifted the rock. He smiled faintly. Bethany called me twice this week. Said you're intimidating residents, blocking driveways, flying drones over property. You believe that? He shook his head. I believe you're smarter than that. Just stay clean. The judge will see through the noise. Before he left, he said something that stuck. Funny thing about justice. It moves slow, but when it shows up, it don't knock. The hearing date was set for January 12th. As we prepared, Sarah brought in a young paralegal to help, a sharp kid named Marcus, who could navigate county databases like a bloodhound. 2 days later, he came running into Sarah's office holding a printout. Look at this, he said, breathless. The Whitfields filed the adverse possession claim in March, but sold the first lot in February. They sold before they even filed. Sarah's smile was pure steel. Premeditation. They just built their own noose. That night, I walked down to the dam alone. The moonlight turned the water silver, quiet except for the soft lap against the stones. The air smelled clean again, washed of rain and lies. I thought of my grandfather, his patience, his quiet strength, the way he'd run his hand over a fence post after fixing it, as if sealing a promise. He'd always said the land remembers. Every footprint, every lie, every act of care or greed, it all stays written somewhere beneath the dust. Now the land was about to speak. The day before court, Sarah called with one final update. The judge assigned to our case is Angela Ramirez. Tough, fair, hates games. You're in good hands. Then so is the land, I said. Outside, the wind picked up, bending the grass, carrying the faint echo of nail guns and saws from the subdivision. Their sound had been defiant once. Now it just sounded nervous. When I went inside, the binder waited on the table. Federal seals, signatures, stamps, and every receipt that proved a man's word could still mean something in a world built on shortcuts. Tomorrow, the floodgates would open, and this time, the water would flow my way. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked through every hour like it was counting down to something more than a court date. The ranch was still except for the wind shifting through the dry grass. Even the coyotes stayed quiet, as if the whole valley knew what was coming. I brewed a pot of coffee I didn't need and stood by the window, watching the dark horizon. Down in the valley, the lights of Ridgeline Springs burned bright, street lamps glowing like a necklace around a thief's throat. For months they'd mocked me with their brightness. Tonight they just looked nervous, flickering in the wind. On the kitchen table lay the binder Sarah had built. Every receipt, permit, survey, photo, and email neatly pressed between plastic sleeves. The pages caught the lamplight like scales on an armored hide. My grandfather's deed sat on top, folded where his hand once did. I ran a thumb over his signature, felt the small ridge of the pen stroke. He'd written it in blue ink, the same color as the dam water when the sun hit it right. I remembered him standing by that water, hat low, saying, "Land's just dirt until someone respects it." At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep, showered, dressed in my only suit, the one I'd worn to his funeral. The jacket felt stiff, shoulders tight, but the cloth held memories. I tucked the deed inside a folder and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and the faint metallic tang of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Halfway down the drive, headlights cut through the fog. A familiar sedan rolled to a stop, Sarah behind the wheel, calm as stone. "You ready?" she asked through the open window. "I've been ready since August." She smiled, not a big one, just a small crease at the corner of her mouth. "Let's go make history then." The road into town was quiet. Frost rimmed the barbed wire fences, the sun slow to climb. Sarah didn't play music, didn't talk much, just sipped her coffee and occasionally flipped through her notes. I could feel the hum of her mind working beside me, methodical, precise. When we reached the courthouse, 2 news vans were parked by the steps. Reporters lingered, breath steaming in the cold. One lifted a camera, and I saw the red record light blink on. Sarah touched my arm. "Ignore them, eyes forward, let them get their picture." Inside, the hallways smelled of waxed floors and old paper. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, pale and cold. People shuffled benches, whispered, adjusted ties. At the far end, Bethany Whitfield stood with her lawyer, pristine in a cream-colored suit. Her pearls gleamed under the lights, and her perfume reached halfway down the hall, sharp and expensive. Preston Hale stood behind her, jaw tight, checking his watch like this was just another meeting to dominate. When her gaze found me, Bethany smiled that same condescending smile I'd first seen at the gate. I nodded once in return, slow and steady, then followed Sarah toward the courtroom doors. Judge Angela Ramirez presided, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Her reputation was clear, fair, fast, and allergic to nonsense. She entered briskly, robe flowing like a shadow. Everyone rose. "Be seated," she said. "Let's begin." Bethany's lawyer, Keir, opened with the usual charm, painting Ridgeline Springs as a thriving example of community progress, unfairly targeted by a disgruntled man clinging to outdated claims. I kept my face still, eyes fixed on the judge. When he finished, Sarah stood. No theatrics, no raised voice, just quiet authority. "Your Honor," she began, "this case isn't about progress. It's about theft disguised as progress. My client, Mr. Morrison, owns the 47 acres known as the Morrison parcel. The defendants built 69 houses on that land without title, without rights, and, most importantly, without shame." She opened the binder, sliding a single sheet forward. Exhibit A, the 1974 Federal Water Permit, showing Morrison ownership and jurisdiction under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Exhibit B, tax receipts paid consistently since 1975. Exhibit C, internal emails between defendants showing they knew these facts before construction began. The room rustled. Bethany's lawyer frowned, riffling through his papers. Judge Ramirez adjusted her glasses. These emails are verified? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah said. Provided by a former project manager who has since left the state for his safety. Bethany's composure cracked for the first time, a tiny flinch at the corner of her mouth. Preston muttered something under his breath. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Keir, do you contest these exhibits? Keir hesitated, eyes darting toward his clients. We have not reviewed these specific communications, Your Honor. Then you'll have time to review them after I deny your motion to dismiss, the judge said flatly. A low murmur rippled through the room. I sat perfectly still, feeling my pulse in my wrists. Sarah remained poised, her tone even. Your Honor, we also ask for an injunction halting all sales and transfers in the Ridgeline Springs development until ownership is resolved. The harm is ongoing. Every home sold deepens the fraud. Judge Ramirez nodded slowly. Granted. Bethany's lawyer started to speak, but she lifted a hand. Save it, counselor. You'll have your turn. Then to Sarah. Prepare for a full trial. 2 weeks from today. I expect concise briefs and clean evidence. I don't tolerate drama in my courtroom. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah said. When the gavel struck, the sound echoed like a rifle crack through the hall. Bethany turned as we exited, her eyes like glass. You think you've won something? She hissed. You have no idea how deep this goes. I looked at her evenly. Then you'd better start digging. Outside, the air felt lighter, almost warm. The reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Sarah kept walking, eyes forward. I followed, clutching the folder to my chest like armor. Back at the ranch that evening, the light over the valley glowed gold, fading into deep blue as the sun dipped. For the first time in months, the noise from Ridgeline Springs had stopped. No saws, no trucks, just stillness. Sarah called one last time before turning in. You did good today, she said. Keep your head down. The next 2 weeks will be rough. They'll fight dirty. I expect nothing less, I said. After she hung up, I stepped outside and leaned against the porch rail. The sky was clear, stars bright enough to see the ridge line in silhouette. The dam water shimmered faintly in the distance, catching the moonlight. I thought of my grandfather again, how he'd built that dam with his own hands, shoveling clay and rock until the water obeyed him. He'd tamed a creek, not to control it, but to live with it. That's what this was now. Not revenge. Balance. Tomorrow they'd start spinning lies again. Tomorrow, the fight would get louder. But tonight, the land was quiet. And for a few hours, so was I. When dawn broke, the air had that thin, metallic chill that only comes before snow. I loaded the truck with the binder, the deed, and 2 thermoses of coffee. One for me, one for Sarah. The sky over the valley was a sheet of pewter, the light soft enough to make the roofs of Ridgeline Springs look like they'd never done anything wrong. But I knew better. At the courthouse, the parking lot was full before 9. 2 news vans idled near the steps, their antennas spearing the gray sky. Inside, the hallway buzzed with low voices and nervous footsteps. Every seat was taken. Families from Ridgeline sat shoulder to shoulder with strangers from town, curiosity thick in the air. Bethany Whitfield arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by her husband Preston and 2 lawyers in tailored suits. She looked as polished as ever, hair perfect, smile measured, a queen walking into her court. Preston followed, his eyes like wet stones, face drawn tight. Sarah was already at our table, files arranged in surgical order. She looked up when I sat down. Ready? Been ready since the day they poured their first driveway. The judge entered promptly at 10. Court is in session. Bethany's team went first, as procedure allowed. Her lead counsel, Keir, started slow, voice dripping with confidence. He spoke about misunderstandings, complicated statutes, and good faith development. He pointed at me once, calling me a disgruntled landowner who failed to protect his property. Sarah didn't flinch. She just waited, eyes half-lidded, like a hawk studying the wind. When Keir finally sat down, she rose, calm as still water. "Your Honor," she said, "we're not here to debate progress. We're here because my client's land was stolen, deliberately, systematically, and with knowledge of its ownership." She walked toward the bench, heels clicking softly. "Let's begin with the truth." She opened the binder and laid the first document on the table. This is the 1974 federal water permit, signed by William Morrison, Jake's grandfather. It proves the land, the dam, and the watershed are under federal jurisdiction. It's not just property, it's a regulated resource. She placed the next page. These are tax receipts, 47 consecutive years of payments, none missed, all confirmed by the county. Then she held up the final exhibit, a single printed email. The courtroom lights caught the paper just right. The audience leaned in. "Exhibit F," Sarah said. "An internal email between Preston Hale and Bethany Whitfield, dated February 18th of last year. It reads, and I quote, 'The Morrison parcel shows active tax status, but if we move quickly, file the AP claim, secure permits, and start pre-sales, we can bury him in litigation before he even realizes.'" The sound that followed wasn't quite gasping, but it was close. Bethany's face froze, the smile curdling at the edges. Preston shifted in his chair, color draining from his cheeks. Judge Ramirez leaned forward. "Counselor Keir, did you know about this?" Keir stood, stammering. "Your Honor, these documents were not part of—" "They were provided in discovery," Sarah said smoothly. "Signed and verified by your client's own server logs." Ramirez held up the page. "This email alone establishes intent. The court will not tolerate deception. Consider your motion to dismiss denied permanently." Keir sank back into his seat. Sarah wasn't finished. "Your Honor, we move to freeze all assets tied to Ridgeline Development pending resolution. The defendants have already sold property under fraudulent title. Continuing transfers would compound the harm." "Motion granted," Ramirez said without hesitation. "All sales, marketing, and property transfers are hereby suspended." Bethany tried to whisper something to Preston, but the microphones picked it up anyway. "They can't do this to us." The judge looked directly at her. "Mrs. Whitfield, I strongly suggest you refrain from speaking. This is my courtroom, not your homeowner meeting." The room rippled with quiet laughter. Even I had to look down to hide my grin. Sarah turned to me, voice low. "That's the sound of justice warming up." After 2 hours, the hearing closed with Ramirez's ruling. A temporary restraining order, expedited trial schedule, and a mandate for full disclosure of all financial and permit records from Whitfield Development. When the gavel struck, it echoed like thunder through the wood-paneled walls. Bethany stood, still trying to hold her composure, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Preston didn't look at anyone. They walked out fast, trailed by their attorneys, cameras flashing in their wake. Sarah gathered her files, exhaled softly. That's checkmate on the opening move. Outside, the air felt different, crisp, alive, almost forgiving. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Sarah ignored them, but I paused for 1 second on the courthouse steps. The clouds were breaking apart above the mountains, sunlight spilling through like gold through cracks in stone. One reporter called out, "Mr. Morrison, how do you feel?" I looked straight into the camera lens, like the land finally spoke for itself. The quote made the evening news. That night, the phone didn't stop ringing. Old friends, neighbors, even my boss Martin called. "You did it," he said. "You made them listen." "Not done yet," I told him. "We just opened the gate." Down in the valley, Ridgeline Springs was dark. No porch lights, no laughter, no hammers, just silence. The still kind that comes after a hard rain, when even the birds take a breath. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the stars climb over the ridge. The deed lay open on the table beside me, its ink shining faintly in the lamplight. Tomorrow, we'd start again. Depositions, evidence, the slow grind of truth. But for tonight, I let the quiet settle back over the land. It had been waiting a long time for this. The morning broke gold and cold. Mist hung over the dam like a veil, and the water mirrored the first light in ripples that looked like breath. I'd been up before sunrise, nerves too restless for sleep. My suit hung on the back of the chair, pressed and ready, the same one from the first hearing. It didn't feel tight anymore. It felt like armor that had learned my shape. Sarah called at 6 sharp. "You good?" "As good as I'll get." "Keep it that way," she said. "We don't need speeches today. Just the truth and the patience to watch it land." Her voice had the steadiness of the river after flood season, quiet but strong enough to carry anything in its path. By 8, we were back in the courthouse. The same faces lined the pews, families from Ridgeline Springs, reporters, a few locals who'd followed every update like it was a ball game. But this time, the air felt heavier. Everyone could sense an ending coming, even if they didn't know which kind. Bethany Whitfield sat at the defense table, flanked by Preston and their attorneys. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick precise, but her hands trembled when she turned a page. Preston avoided looking at her or anyone else, eyes locked on the table like he was already reading the verdict. Judge Ramirez entered at 9:05, robes flowing, expression unreadable. "We're reconvened for final arguments and ruling in Morrison versus Whitfield development," she said. "Counselors, proceed." Keir went first again, but his confidence was gone. His words stumbled through legal jargon. Disputed possession. Contractual misunderstanding. Good faith construction. Each phrase fell flat against the walls. He looked like a man trying to patch a dam with paper. When he finished, Sarah stood. She didn't carry her binder this time, just a single manila folder. "Your Honor," she said, "this isn't complicated. The defendants built a subdivision on land that was not theirs. They knew it. They documented it. They bragged about it in writing. They committed fraud, not by mistake but by calculation." She paused, turning toward the crowd behind us. "They thought they could bury a man under his own quiet. They thought money and paperwork could outweigh truth. But the law remembers, and so does the land." She opened the folder, sliding one sheet forward. "This," she said, "is the final audit from Ridgeline's title insurer. It confirms that every house, every road, every fence built on the Morrison parcel was sold under false title." Then she looked at me. "Your Honor, my client isn't asking for punishment. He's asking for restoration, for the right to stand on his own land without being told he's trespassing." Ramirez nodded slowly, her pen tapping once against the bench. "The court has reviewed all exhibits, including the newly submitted audit. Mr. Keir, do you contest the findings?" Keir's mouth opened, then closed. "No, Your Honor." Ramirez leaned back. "Then let's make this simple." The room stilled. The defendants, Bethany and Preston Whitfield and their associated companies are found liable for fraud, trespass, and unlawful enrichment. All title and property within the Morrison parcel are hereby restored to the lawful owner, Mr. Jake Morrison. The sound of her gavel cracked through the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then a rush of sound filled the courtroom. Gasps, whispers, the snap of camera shutters. Bethany slumped in her chair, color draining from her face. Preston's jaw went slack, eyes glassy. Ramirez continued, her voice clear and final. Furthermore, the defendants are ordered to pay damages for trespass and emotional distress in the amount of $4,200,000, plus attorney's fees. The court refers this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. Bethany's lawyer tried to stand, but she waved him down, her voice small. Sit. The gavel struck once more. Court adjourned. Sarah turned to me, eyes bright, a slow grin breaking her composure for the first time in months. You did it, Jake. I shook my head. No, we did. Outside, sunlight hit the courthouse steps like revelation. The reporters surged again, microphones outstretched, questions firing from every direction. I answered just one. What's next for you, Mr. Morrison? I smiled. Fix the dam. Keep the promise. The clip ran on every Denver station that night. Weeks passed. Whitfield Development folded, its assets seized. The Range Rover disappeared from the HOA driveway. Preston filed bankruptcy. Bethany vanished from public view. But the families who'd bought their homes stayed. They'd done nothing wrong. And when Sarah and I met with them at the clubhouse, unfinished, echoing, sunlight streaming through the bare beams, I told them what would happen next. I'm not taking your homes, Atari said. You bought in good faith. I've set up a community trust. You'll pay what you owe, not a dollar more. No interest, no lawyers. This land was meant to be lived on, not fought over. For a moment, there was silence. Then someone began to clap. Others followed. A woman near the front, Sarah Chen, I'd later learn, had tears in her eyes. You could have taken it all, she said. I've taken enough, I replied. That night, I walked the ridge alone. The houses below glowed warm and soft, no longer enemies, just homes. The dam water shimmered under the moon, calm and full. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, like the land had exhaled. I built a small cabin near the north edge, just above the reservoir. Nothing fancy. Wood stove, 2 rooms, porch facing east. I hung my grandfather's note over the door. Don't let them take what's yours. Some mornings I sit with coffee watching the fog lift off the water. Other times I hear kids' laughter echoing up from ridgeline and think maybe the land forgave us all. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It just stands its ground and waits for truth to catch up. When it finally does, the sound it makes isn't a shout. It's the soft rustle of paper sliding across a courtroom table, the whisper of a gavel, the sigh of a man who can finally breathe. And that sound, I've learned, is the sound of peace characters. 314. If you've ever stood your ground for what's right, or wished you had, drop a justice in the comments below. Out here, land isn't just dirt. It's dignity, memory, and the promise that truth still matters. And if stories like this remind you why we keep fighting the good fight, hit subscribe. There's more real-life justice coming down the road.